My brother stole my championship medal. Then the truth went viral. Part 1. The hero everyone loved. For 10 years, the world believed my brother was a champion. His smiling face hung inside swimming academies across America. Young athletes wore t-shirts with his signature printed across the back. Sports documentaries replayed the same triumphant footage every summer, showing him climbing onto the podium with tears in his eyes as commentators praised his unbelievable determination. Corporate sponsors fought to put his face beside their logos. He became the kind of athlete parents pointed toward whenever they wanted their children to dream bigger. Newspapers called him America's golden son. Television hosts admired his humility. Fans waited hours just to shake his hand after charity events. Every single time I saw those headlines, I switched off the television. Not because I hated seeing someone succeed, because every interview, every speech, every standing ovation reminded me of the same unbearable truth. That medal had never belonged to him. It belonged to me. No one knew my name anymore. Noah Reed, the younger brother, the swimmer who disappeared, the man history quietly erased. For nearly a decade, I lived a life that couldn't have been further from the spotlight. Every morning before sunrise, I unlocked the doors of Harbor View Community Aquatic Center on the outskirts of Seattle. The building was old enough that its pipes groaned awake before the lights did, and the familiar scent of chlorine lingered in every hallway. Children laughed during beginner classes, retirees exercised in the shallow lanes, and teenagers prepared for local competitions under fluorescent lights that flickered whenever the rain became too heavy outside. To everyone there, I was simply Coach Noah, the patient instructor who stayed late to help nervous children conquer their fear of deep water. The man who remembered birthdays. The coach who never raised his voice. Nobody asked why I never attended national championships anymore. Nobody wondered why an Olympic-level swimmer had quietly vanished from professional competition before reaching his prime. People assumed injuries had ended my career. That assumption was easier than the truth. Some scars never showed up on MRI scans. The story everyone knew began 10 years earlier at the national championship trials in Austin, Texas. It was supposed to be my race, not Ethan's. Despite being 3 years younger, I had entered the trials ranked first in the country in the 200-meter freestyle. Every coach believed I would become America's next international star. My lap times had shattered junior records. Sports magazines featured articles predicting I would dominate the next decade of competitive swimming. Even Ethan admitted I was faster. Back then, I thought that mattered. I was young enough to believe talent always defeated politics. I couldn't have been more wrong. Ethan had something I didn't. Charm. He walked into every room like he'd already won. Coaches loved his confidence. Sponsors admired how naturally he smiled in front of cameras. Journalists remembered his jokes long after interviews ended. He knew everyone's names, from officials to janitors, and somehow made each person feel important. Meanwhile, I preferred silence. Swimming had always spoken for me. The water never demanded speeches. It never cared who smiled better. It only respected speed. On race day, I delivered the performance of my life. Every stroke felt effortless, every turn perfectly timed. As I exploded off the final wall, I sensed victory before I even saw the finish. When my fingers touched the timing pad, I looked up. Lane 4. Noah Reed. First place. I still remember hearing the crowd erupt. My coach hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. Reporters rushed toward the pool deck. Cameras pointed in my direction. Volunteers hurried to prepare the podium. 5 beautiful minutes. I believed my life had changed forever. Then everything fell apart. The officials suddenly gathered around the electronic timing system. One monitor flickered. Another shut off completely. Conversations became whispers. Whispers became arguments. Athletes exchanged confused glances from behind the starting blocks. No one explained anything. Nearly 30 minutes passed before an announcement echoed through the arena. Due to a technical malfunction, the official finishing order will be determined using backup recording procedures. The crowd applauded politely. None of us suspected what those words would eventually cost. Hours later, revised results appeared. First place, Ethan Reed. Second place, Noah Reed. I stared at the scoreboard until the letters blurred together. There had to be a mistake. Everyone in my lane knew I'd finished first. My coach protested immediately. Several swimmers complained. Even spectators insisted they had seen me touch the wall before Ethan. Officials thanked everyone for their concerns, then dismissed every objection. The backup footage, they claimed, clearly showed Ethan winning by 0.02 of a second. Case closed. I wanted to appeal. I begged my coach to keep fighting. But appeals required evidence. The original timing data had been corrupted during the system failure. The backup recording became the official result. End of discussion. Within days, newspapers celebrated Ethan's miraculous victory. Commentators called it one of the closest races in championship history. Television stations replayed the grainy backup footage repeatedly. The angle was terrible. Half the finish line wasn't even visible. Still, viewers accepted what the announcers told them. If officials said Ethan won, then Ethan won. Simple. The strangest part wasn't losing. Athletes lose all the time. It was watching my own brother slowly begin believing the lie himself. At first, Ethan avoided discussing the race around me. Then he started calling it our unforgettable championship. Eventually, it became the race I won. As years passed, his memories changed. Or perhaps his conscience simply adapted. Either way, every interview became slightly more dramatic, slightly more heroic, slightly less truthful. I never stopped believing in myself. I knew I had one final burst. I touched the wall and prayed. Millions admired those stories. Only I knew the ending had been rewritten. My own career unraveled quickly. Without the national title, major sponsors withdrew. International selection committees overlooked me. Financial pressure mounted. My father insisted I should congratulate Ethan instead of dwelling on disappointment. People remember winners, he told me. Your brother earned this opportunity. I looked at him in disbelief. You watched the race. He couldn't meet my eyes. I saw what the officials announced. That sentence destroyed something inside me. Not because it was true, because it was easier. Our family stopped talking about swimming altogether. Holiday dinners became awkward. Birthdays became obligations. Eventually, I moved across the country. Seattle offered anonymity. I welcomed it. Years passed. Children I coached eventually became collegiate swimmers. Some even thanked me during interviews after winning state championships. Those moments brought genuine happiness. Yet every August, when sports networks replayed Ethan's famous championship, I quietly left the room. Healing wasn't forgetting. It was learning how to breathe around old wounds. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. One rainy Thursday evening, after finishing the final youth practice, I sat alone in the empty bleachers while thunder echoed beyond the pool's glass ceiling. The building had fallen silent except for the rhythmic splash of the filtration system. My knees ached from demonstrating butterfly drills all afternoon, and I absent-mindedly scrolled through my phone while waiting for the storm to pass. A notification appeared. Unknown sender. There was no message. Only a single video file. No explanation. No subject line. No name. Just 4 words in the file title. Watch until the end. For reasons I still can't explain, a chill crept down my spine before I even pressed play. I had the strange feeling that whatever waited inside that video wasn't just an old recording. It was the beginning of the end. Part 2. The video that changed everything. The rain hammered against the glass roof of Harbor View Community Aquatic Center as Noah stared at the anonymous video on his phone. For nearly a minute, he didn't move. His thumb hovered over the play button while dozens of impossible questions flooded his mind. Who had sent it? Why now, after 10 years of silence? And why did his instincts tell him that opening this file would change everything he had spent a decade trying to bury? Finally, he pressed play. The screen faded from black into a crystal-clear overhead view of the national championship pool in Austin. Noah's heartbeat immediately quickened. This wasn't the grainy backup footage the public had watched for years. This was the original broadcast feed. It was sharper than he remembered, filmed from directly above the finish line. Every lane was perfectly visible. Every swimmer's final stroke could be seen without obstruction. There was no confusing angle, no missing section of the pool, no room for interpretation. Noah instinctively leaned forward. The race began. For the first 100 meters, Ethan and Noah stayed nearly even. The commentator praised the Reed brothers as the closest siblings American swimming had ever produced. At the final turn, Noah exploded off the wall with the powerful underwater kick he had practiced thousands of times since childhood. His body surged ahead by barely half an arm's length. The final 10 meters arrived. Stroke. Stroke. One last reach. Noah's fingertips slammed against the timing pad. Less than a fraction of a second later, Ethan touched the wall. The difference was unmistakable. Not only had Noah finished first, the official electronic scoreboard visible in the corner of the broadcast flashed before abruptly cutting away. Lane 4, first place, Noah Reed. The video froze. The next frame showed the timestamp. The recording had never been edited. Noah stopped breathing. For 10 years, he had doubted his own memories during sleepless nights. Sometimes he wondered if grief had distorted what he'd seen. Sometimes he questioned whether pride had refused to accept defeat. Now the truth stared back at him in high definition. He hadn't imagined anything. He had won. Another screen appeared. This time it was a recorded message from an elderly man sitting inside what looked like a storage room filled with dusty videotapes. "My name is Arthur Benson," he began quietly. "I was the senior broadcast archive technician assigned to the national championship coverage that year." He sighed heavily before continuing. "I've carried this burden for a decade." Arthur explained that immediately after the race, the network's live production team had archived multiple camera feeds. Before the footage could be released publicly, representatives from the championship committee requested copies for what they described as technical verification. Days later, Arthur noticed something strange. The master recording had disappeared from the archive. In its place sat the lower quality backup feed that eventually aired nationwide. When Arthur questioned the change, he was instructed to leave the matter alone. "I was nearing retirement," he admitted. "I convinced myself it wasn't my fight." He lowered his eyes. "But every year I watched interviews celebrating the wrong champion. Every year that medal haunted me." Arthur looked directly into the camera. "I recently learned I have terminal cancer." The words landed like stones. "My doctors say I probably won't live to see next spring." Silence filled the room. "I don't want to leave this world carrying a lie." He reached beside him and held up a labeled hard drive. "I kept one personal backup copy of the original broadcast because something about that day never felt right." His voice trembled. "If you're watching this, Noah Reed, I'm sorry." Noah replayed the message 3 times. Then 4. By the 5th viewing, tears blurred the screen. Not because someone had apologized. Because for the first time in 10 years, someone had believed him. He barely slept that night. By sunrise, the anonymous email had been replaced by another notification. Arthur's grandson had uploaded the original footage online after receiving his grandfather's permission. Within hours, the internet discovered it. At first, only a few swimming enthusiasts noticed the discrepancy. Then someone posted a side-by-side comparison between the original broadcast and the official backup recording. Another account slowed both videos frame by frame. A sports historian highlighted the electronic scoreboard visible in the original footage. By lunchtime, the hashtag Justice for Noah began trending nationwide. By evening, it had become the #1 topic in America. Then the rest of the world joined. Millions of people watched the finish from every possible angle. Olympic swimmers commented beneath the clips. Former coaches expressed disbelief. Sports analysts admitted they had never seen evidence this overwhelming emerge after such a long time. The story spread from YouTube to TikTok, from TikTok to Instagram, from Instagram to Reddit. Within 24 hours, the original video surpassed 50 million views. Noah's quiet life disappeared overnight. Television vans parked outside Harborview Aquatic Center before sunrise. Reporters crowded the entrance. Students arriving for swim lessons froze in surprise as microphones filled the sidewalk. "Coach Noah, did your brother steal your title? How long have you known? Will you sue the federation?" Noah walked through them silently. The children still had lessons. They deserved normalcy. Inside the pool, 8-year-old Lily nervously prepared for her first dive off the starting block. She looked at the cameras outside. "Coach, are you famous?" Noah smiled gently. "I'd rather be your coach." She grinned, then jumped. For those few seconds, while helping frightened children learn to swim, the noise outside disappeared. Meanwhile, across the country, Ethan Reed's perfect life began collapsing. His social media accounts filled with millions of furious comments. Sponsors issued carefully worded statements announcing they were reviewing their partnerships. Within 48 hours, 3 major athletic brands terminated endorsement contracts. A sports drink commercial featuring Ethan vanished from television. Charity organizations quietly removed his photographs from promotional campaigns. Interview invitations stopped arriving. For the first time in his career, silence replaced applause. The pressure only intensified when investigative journalists uncovered something even more troubling. Emails obtained from former championship officials revealed internal discussions immediately following the race. Several referees had questioned the backup footage. One even wrote, "The original timing appears inconsistent with the replacement recording." Another requested an independent review. The request was denied. No explanation followed. The governing federation announced it was opening a formal investigation into the decade-old championship. What had once seemed impossible was now official. Noah still refused every interview, until one unexpected visitor arrived. His former coach, Daniel Harper. The older man stood outside the pool carrying a faded stopwatch. His eyes were red before Noah even opened the door. "I should have fought harder." Noah stared silently. Coach Harper continued, "They threatened legal action if we kept appealing. They told us there wasn't enough evidence." He swallowed painfully. "I convinced myself protecting your future meant helping you move on. You were 20. I failed you." Noah embraced him without speaking. Neither man noticed the reporters photographing the moment through the windows. That evening, Noah finally turned on the television. Every network covered only one story. The screen displayed the headline, "Who really won America's most famous swimming race?" Then another clip appeared. Ethan walking into his home with cameras surrounding him. One reporter shouted the question everyone wanted answered. "Did you always know your brother touched first?" Ethan stopped walking. For several seconds, he said nothing. His face had lost the effortless confidence America admired for so many years. Finally, he whispered only 5 words. "I need time to think." He disappeared behind the front door. The cameras kept rolling. Back in Seattle, Noah switched off the television and looked at the old championship photo tucked inside a drawer. For 10 years, he had dreamed of hearing the truth. Now the entire world was demanding it. But as his phone buzzed with hundreds of interview requests, legal inquiries, and messages from strangers calling him a hero, Noah realized something unsettling. Justice wasn't arriving quietly. It was arriving like a tidal wave. And before it was over, it would drown everyone who had built their lives upon a lie. Part 3. Justice comes at a cost. The investigation that was expected to last months took less than 3 weeks. There was simply too much evidence. The resurfaced broadcast footage had shattered the official narrative, but investigators soon uncovered documents that painted an even darker picture. The original electronic timing logs, long believed to have been corrupted beyond recovery, had never actually vanished. An independent cybersecurity firm managed to recover fragments from an archived server that had been overlooked during a routine system migration years earlier. Though incomplete, the recovered data confirmed what millions of viewers had already concluded after watching the original video. Lane 4. Noah Reid. First place. The championship committee had known. Whether through negligence, incompetence, or deliberate misconduct, officials had accepted the altered backup recording while ignoring the evidence directly in front of them. Several former administrators insisted they had merely followed instructions from senior executives. Others claimed they had been pressured to protect the credibility of the event. A handful resigned before the investigation even concluded. The scandal grew larger than a single swimming race. It became a national conversation about integrity, accountability, and the dangerous cost of protecting public heroes at the expense of the truth. Noah still hadn't spoken publicly. He continued teaching every morning, refusing television interviews despite increasingly generous offers. News helicopters occasionally circled above the aquatic center, hoping to capture footage of the man everyone suddenly wanted to know. To his students, nothing changed. Coach Noah still arrived before sunrise. He still adjusted crooked swim goggles, tied loose shoelaces, and cheered louder for a child's first successful lap than he ever had for his own victories. One afternoon, 10-year-old Mason approached him after practice. "Coach, yeah. My dad says you're the real champion." Noah smiled faintly. "What do you think?" The boy shrugged. "I think you've always acted like one." Those simple words stayed with Noah longer than any headline ever could. Across the country, Ethan's world was unraveling. The mansion he had proudly displayed in magazine interviews sat behind locked gates as reporters camped outside day and night. Every endorsement had disappeared. His autobiography was pulled from bookstore shelves. A documentary celebrating his career was quietly canceled before filming resumed. Friends stopped returning his calls. Former teammates distanced themselves. Even people who had once praised his character now insisted they had always suspected something wasn't right. Fame, Noah realized, was remarkably loyal. Until it wasn't. 3 days before the investigation's final report was released, Noah received an unexpected knock on his apartment door. Standing in the hallway was Ethan. For the first time in over 4 years. He looked older than his 40 years. The expensive tailored suits had been replaced by jeans and a plain gray sweatshirt. Dark circles rested beneath exhausted eyes that had spent weeks avoiding cameras. Neither brother spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "I don't deserve you opening that door." Noah folded his arms. "No, I don't." Ethan nodded. "I know." He looked down at the floor before quietly asking, "Can we talk?" They sat across from one another at Noah's small kitchen table. The silence between them carried 10 years of unanswered questions. Ethan wrapped trembling hands around a mug of untouched coffee. "I never planned for any of this." Noah didn't respond. "The day of the race." Ethan whispered, "I knew you beat me." Those 6 words landed harder than Noah had imagined they would. "I looked at the scoreboard before they turned it off." His voice cracked. "I saw your name." Then officials started arguing. They asked me to stay in a private room while they reviewed everything. Noah's expression hardened. "What happened?" Ethan closed his eyes. "They came back and said there had been a technical issue. They told me the backup footage showed I'd won." "You knew it didn't." "I did. So why didn't you say anything?" Ethan's shoulders slumped. "Because everyone around me kept saying the same thing. Don't question it. The officials made their decision. This is your opportunity. Think about your future." He laughed bitterly. "I told myself maybe I had remembered the finish wrong. But every year, I remembered a little more. And lying became easier than telling the truth." A tear rolled down his cheek. "Until I couldn't separate the lie from my own memories anymore." Noah stared at the man who had once been his hero. He didn't see a champion. He saw someone who had spent 10 years imprisoned by his own choices. "You didn't just steal a medal," Noah said quietly. "You stole a decade." Ethan lowered his head. "I know. And I'm sorry isn't enough." "No, it isn't." A week later, the National Swimming Federation held a nationally televised press conference. Millions watched. Noah sat in the front row. Ethan sat several seats away. The Federation president stepped to the podium. "Following an independent investigation, we have concluded that the official results of the National Championship men's 200-meter freestyle final were incorrect." The room fell completely silent. "The rightful gold medalist is..." He paused. "Noah Reid." Applause slowly filled the auditorium, then grew louder, then became a standing ovation. For the first time in 10 years, people were applauding the right man. An official approached Noah carrying a velvet presentation case. Inside rested the championship gold medal. Untouched, its polished surface reflected the bright television lights as though it had been waiting all this time. When the medal was placed around Noah's neck, cameras flashed from every direction. Reporters expected celebration. Instead, Noah simply closed his eyes. The medal felt strangely heavy. He had imagined this moment for years. He expected triumph. Instead, he felt grief. Because medals could be returned. Time could not. Then Ethan unexpectedly walked to the podium. No one had invited him. He faced the cameras, then faced his younger brother. "I have something to say." The room became silent once more. "For 10 years, I accepted praise that belonged to someone else." His voice shook. "I knew, from the day of that race, that my brother touched the wall first." Gasps echoed throughout the audience. "I convinced myself staying silent wasn't the same as lying. I was wrong." He turned toward Noah. "You were always the better swimmer. And you've always been the better man." Then, before millions watching around the world, Ethan removed the replica championship medal he had worn to countless public events over the years. He placed it on the podium and walked away, without another word. Months passed. The media eventually found a new scandal. The crowds disappeared. Life grew quiet again. Noah returned to Harbor View Community Aquatic Center, where laughter echoed through the lanes and nervous children still celebrated their first successful dives. One Saturday morning, the championship medal rested inside a glass display near the entrance. A small plaque beneath it read, "Noah Reid National Champion." Nothing more, nothing less. When visitors asked why such an accomplished athlete chose to teach children instead of chasing fame again, Noah always smiled before giving the same answer. Winning races made me fast. Losing everything taught me who I wanted to become. Years later, one of Noah's students qualified for the national championships. Before leaving for the competition, the teenager nervously asked his coach if he had any final advice. Noah looked toward the old medal gleaming softly inside its display case. Then back at the young swimmer. Records will eventually be broken. Medals will collect dust. But your character, that's the one victory no one can ever steal. The young athlete nodded, inspired by words spoken from experience rather than theory. As Noah watched him leave, he realized the greatest race of his life had never been the one in Austin. It had been the long journey back to himself. The world finally knew the truth. The medal had found its rightful owner. And although justice had arrived 10 years too late, it had arrived nonetheless. Epilogue. The champion history almost forgot. 1 year later, the scandal that had once dominated every news channel had faded into history. The television panels had moved on to new controversies. Social media had found new heroes to celebrate and new villains to condemn. The endless stream of headlines that had consumed Noah and Ethan's lives finally slowed until, one day, they disappeared altogether. For the first time in over a decade, silence no longer felt lonely. It felt peaceful. Harbor View Community Aquatic Center remained exactly as Noah loved it. The old pipes still rattled awake before sunrise. The scent of chlorine still drifted through every hallway, and the walls still echoed with children's laughter instead of television cameras. The only noticeable change greeted visitors near the entrance. Mounted inside a modest glass case was the National Championship gold medal. Beside it hung a single framed photograph, not of Noah standing on a podium, not of reporters surrounding him after the investigation. Instead, it showed Noah kneeling beside a frightened 7-year-old learning to float for the first time, both of them laughing as water splashed across the lane. Many visitors looked at the medal. Almost everyone stopped longer at the photograph. Noah preferred it that way. His life had become surprisingly full after the truth emerged. Universities invited him to speak about sportsmanship. National teams offered him coaching positions. Publishers approached him with million-dollar book deals telling him that people wanted to hear the incredible story of the champion who had been robbed of his victory. He politely declined almost all of them. He wasn't interested in becoming famous for surviving betrayal. He wanted to keep helping children discover the joy he had once found in the water before competition had complicated everything. Occasionally, he accepted invitations to speak at youth swimming camps. He never talked about revenge or injustice. Instead, he spoke about honesty, about perseverance, about choosing integrity when nobody was watching. The young athletes listened carefully, unaware that the quiet coach before them had become one of the most respected voices in American sports. Not everyone received a happy ending. Several championship officials lost their positions after the investigation concluded. New policies were introduced requiring every national competition to preserve original broadcast footage and electronic timing records in multiple secure archives. Sports organizations across the country adopted similar safeguards. Reporters later called it the Reed Rule. It ensured that what had happened to Noah could never happen to another athlete again. That knowledge brought him more satisfaction than any trophy ever could. As for Ethan, he vanished from public life. For months, no one knew where he had gone. Then, quietly, a local newspaper published a small story that barely reached national attention. Former swimming champion Ethan Reed had accepted a volunteer position teaching adaptive swimming lessons for children with physical disabilities. There were no television crews, no endorsement contracts, no autograph sessions, only children who didn't know his name and didn't care about old headlines. When Noah saw the article, he stared at it for a long time. People often asked whether he hated his brother. The answer was complicated. Hatred had consumed too many years already. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting what had happened. It simply meant refusing to let the past decide the rest of his future. One autumn afternoon, Noah drove to the small community pool where Ethan volunteered. He stood quietly behind the observation window. Inside the water, Ethan patiently encouraged a little girl wearing bright pink goggles as she struggled through her first few strokes. When she finally reached the other side of the lane, she threw her arms around him. His smile wasn't the polished grin that had once sold millions of dollars worth of advertisements. It was smaller, sadder, real. Without announcing his presence, Noah turned and walked back to his car. Some conversations no longer needed words. That winter, Noah received one final package. It had been sent by Arthur Benson's grandson. Inside was a handwritten letter. My grandfather passed away peacefully last month. Before he died, he asked me to thank you for giving him peace. He said the greatest mistake of his life was staying silent, and the greatest relief of his life was finally telling the truth. Folded beneath the letter was a faded photograph. It showed Arthur inside the old broadcast truck on the day of the championship, smiling beside stacks of recording equipment. On the back, he had written only one sentence. The truth may swim slowly, but it always reaches the wall. Noah carefully framed the photograph and placed it beside the championship medal. Whenever anyone asked who the man in the picture was, Noah answered with the same quiet respect. The person who reminded me that one honest voice can change history. Several years later, Harborview Aquatic Center hosted its annual youth championship. The bleachers were packed with cheering families. Parents waved homemade signs. Children laughed nervously behind the starting blocks. Among the spectators sat Noah's aging parents. Tom had softened them. After the investigation, they had apologized repeatedly for believing what had been easiest instead of what had been right. Trust had taken years to rebuild. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. When the races ended, Noah stepped onto the pool deck to present medals. One nervous little boy finished second and fought back tears as silver was placed around his neck. I'm sorry, the boy whispered. I wanted gold. Noah knelt until they were eye to eye. Can I tell you a secret? The boy nodded. There was a time when I thought one medal decided my entire life. He gently tapped the silver medal hanging around the child's neck. I was wrong. The person you become after the race will always matter more than the color around your neck. The boy smiled through watery eyes. Years later, he would remember those words far more clearly than the race itself. As evening settled over the quiet pool, Noah remained alone on the deck after everyone had gone home. The water reflected the orange glow of the setting sun. He looked at his own reflection and barely recognized the man staring back. Not because he had grown older, because he had finally become someone who no longer measured his worth by a finish line. 10 years had been stolen from him. Nothing could change that. But the years ahead still belonged to him. He smiled softly, switched off the pool lights, and locked the doors behind him. Outside, children ran laughing toward waiting parents, already dreaming about tomorrow's practice. Inside the entrance, one gold medal rested beneath a simple plaque. No grand title, no dramatic inscription, just the truth. Noah Reed, national champion. Sometimes justice arrives late. Sometimes history remembers the wrong hero. But sooner or later, the truth rises to the surface, just like the strongest swimmer.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more manhwa-style stories. Comment your favorite moment.